Disclaimer. This video content is AI generated as educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. Your health concerns may be unique. Always consult your physician or a qualified healthcare provider for personalized guidance.
Today, we're digging into a really powerful idea: how a dry, clinical medical document can actually become a key to unlocking social justice. We're going to go way beyond the clinic to see how science is being used to fight for people's fundamental rights. So let's just jump right in with a pretty basic question. Can a health condition, something you deal with day in and day out, actually get in the way of your basic rights? You know, for millions of people, this isn't some theoretical question. Just managing the health side of diabetes is a massive challenge on its own. But honestly, that's only half the story. The other, often invisible battle is the one they have to wage against discrimination. So to really get a handle on this fight, you first have to understand the battlefield. Let's talk about the daily challenges that people are up against. And we're not talking about some vague, abstract concept here. This discrimination is very real, and it pops up in the most important parts of life. We're talking about a kid's right to an education, an adult's ability to land a job they're perfectly qualified for, the simple freedom of getting a driver's license, or even just finding safe childcare. So how in the world do you fight back against barriers that are so widespread? Well, it turns out the solution actually starts in a pretty unexpected place. And that brings us to this powerful tool called the Standard for Care. Now, at first glance, the Standards of Care in Diabetes from the American Diabetes Association sounds, well, exactly like what it is: a clinical document. It's basically a guide for doctors, based on science, on how to give the best possible care. But its purpose goes so much deeper than that. And check out this quote. It just perfectly captures the bigger picture. A key goal for the ADA is for people with diabetes to live free from the burden of discrimination. All of a sudden, it's not just about managing blood sugar anymore, is it? It's about letting people live full, complete lives. That really changes the whole perspective. So this leads us to what I think is the most fascinating part of this whole story. How do you take a medical guideline and turn it into actual, real-world action? I mean, really think about it. How do you take these super scientific, peer-reviewed recommendations and use them to challenge a bad policy at a school or an unfair rule at work? There's got to be some kind of bridge, right? Well, the ADA figured out a pretty brilliant pathway. First, you have the hard science, the recommendations that get reviewed and published. That becomes the official standards of care. But then, and this is the genius part, they create specific advocacy statements based on those standards. These things translate the science into plain language that can be used to educate policymakers, schools, employers. It's literally a direct line from the research lab to the law. Okay, so that's the theory. That's how it works on paper. But let's look at what happens in real life. Where does this advocacy actually make a difference? Let's start in a place that matters so much to so many families: the school. Think about it. A kid spends a huge chunk of their day at school. So these advocacy statements make sure that schools aren't just winging it when it comes to care. They push for things like clear communication, proper staff training, and they guarantee that a child can take part in every single school activity just like any other kid. It's about safety, sure, but it's also about inclusion. All right, next up, let's talk about a major area of concern for adults: the workplace. The standard here is crystal clear. If you have diabetes and you're qualified for a job, you're eligible for it, period. This directly attacks those old, outdated stereotypes and forces employers to make decisions based on someone's actual ability. It also means they have to seriously consider making reasonable changes to the workplace. It's all about making choices based on science, not on fear. Okay, what about another huge piece of independence: getting behind the wheel of a car? This is all about fighting against those one-size-fits-all restrictions. So instead of a state agency just saying nope because of a diagnosis, these advocacy statements force a change. They push for individual assessments and provide the scientific framework to figure out if someone is actually fit to drive. It's about replacing lazy assumptions with hard data. And the impact doesn't just stop there. This same model is being used everywhere to make sure toddlers get proper care in childcare centers, to set standards in places like detention facilities, and even to fight the huge battle over making insulin affordable. It's a really comprehensive approach. So let's kind of zoom out and bring this all together. When you boil it all down, what this is really about is protecting people's fundamental rights. And this table really sums it up perfectly. In school, the principle is access and safety. At work, it's fair opportunity. For driving, it's individual assessment, not stereotyping. And in childcare, it's all about safe, inclusive care. You see? Every setting is tied directly to a basic right, and it's all backed up by science. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, the biggest takeaway is this. The standards of care might have started out as simple medical advice, but they've turned into something way more powerful. They've essentially become a blueprint for equality. And that leaves us with a really interesting question to think about. This model, using evidence-based standards to fight for people's rights, is incredibly powerful. So it makes you wonder, what other areas of life, maybe even things that have nothing to do with health, could be totally transformed if we just had a clear, respected standard of care? It's definitely something to chew on.